Well, you got to go inside to turn it on? No, that's good.
No, which way? There you go. There we go. Looks like it's live. Okay, this is going to be a blitzkrieg through this topic area, but we're trying to look at accessible collaboration. And this is really an unrealized potential. The collaboration and telecollaboration are basically reinventing the workplace and even our productive social interaction. And these can actually be barriers, or they can be pathways to more accessibility. And this is one of the challenges of this area. Electronically mediated interaction actually has a better chance of being accessible than non-electronically mediated. If you're sitting in a room and someone's blind and you're trying to show things, there's no way for it to be made accessible. However, if you're doing it remotely and it's being done through a computer, then we can bring all of the power of the computer to it. And in the future, we can even have completely inaccessible things recognized and made accessible. A key problem, however, in collaboration tools is this basically interaction that has to be group-based. And when you need to do this, all of the pieces in the group need to be accessible. Also, one of the big problems is that you can have a system that's all set up. You picked it. This is the telecollaboration system that works for you, but that's not the one that your host is using. And so it doesn't really matter, like you can pick a computer or you can pick an operating system that works for you. In collaboration, you basically are stuck with whatever the system is that the host pops up on you. And so we need to figure out how to provide accessibility to whatever it is that comes at us. And that's a lot harder than fixing our own thing. Now, telecollaboration is one key area in this, and it's invading employment, both local and global, education, webinars, and this is in companies as well as education, but even social and family conventions. If we don't figure out how to solve this, it's starting to have that people can be dispersed and be together, except if you have a disability. We've now used this ourselves in family gatherings when one or another member couldn't be there. I come from a family of 6, and we get together like 4 or 5 times a year, so we're a very close family, and yet when one is off in another place, that's a problem. Now, there's many barriers. A lot of the times you will find, and these are in telecollaboration and in other collaborations, a lot of times the information is only visual, and if you can't see and there isn't any way to have it made into another format, or it's only auditory, or we have physically challenging controls. We also have complex presentations where the information on the screen is so complex that you have a hard time fighting your way through the presentation of it to actually get to the information underneath. And then we have language issues as well. And interestingly, all of these things are things that people with disabilities, but as Bill talked about, these are a continuum. And you'll find that all of us have hit these ourselves. I'm always on teleconference calls where people can't figure out where the controls are or how to use them. And this is the top level of people with, I call, both intelligence if people have that, but I also talk about a technology quotient, a TQ, because I know people who are a lot brighter than I am who have trouble with technologies less than I do. So there's this technology orientation. And these things are blocking all of us, but they're absolute barriers. Where they're inconvenience to some of us, they're absolute barriers to others, and they don't need to be. Our solutions, however, can also create new problems. So we have this, and I'm doing a demonstration, and the person's deaf, so I caption it. So now here I'm saying, and then you take this knot and you loop it over like this, and they have a choice. They can either see what I'm talking about, or they can read the words, but they can't do both. Or for somebody who is blind, I'm going along doing a presentation, and I do something visual. Now they could hear the description of it, but then they can't hear what I'm saying. So we have this tool channel where we either spatially, we have captions at the bottom and what's going on is at the top and you can't look in both places, or temporally, I'm actually presenting 2 tracks of visual information or 2 tracks of audio information at the same time. Adding accessibility can actually add complexity. So however complicated it was to figure out what was going on, if I'm having to try and read and captions and operate in two different directions or operate controls that are physically difficult for me to do, this is a problem. It reminds me back when we started working with people with cerebral palsy, and I quickly learned that sit up and pay attention was a contradiction, that they could either sit up, which took a lot. It's sort of like, think of yourself standing on the back of a horse while it's moving, and you're trying to keep your balance, and then ask you to add two numbers together, and you can't, because all of your cognitive process is being used just to keep yourself balanced. And so a lot of times we would find kids who would find themselves leaning way over and wrap themselves around the wheelchair in order to lock themselves up physically so that they could pay attention. But these are things that happen and we need to be thinking about as we create physically challenging. It will increase the cognitive challenge as well. We also cover information up with, we throw up captions and it covers up what you're supposed to be looking at that's supposed to be captioned. And then we can also cause information to be missed by distracting them with the alternate presentation. So we need to be aware that these things, and a good way of doing it is to sort of walk a mile in those shoes. Now, there's a number of things that we have identified, and we're working on solutions for this, and we're actually working in conjunction with another one of your speakers today, which is Steve Jacobs from Ideal Corporation. We're trying to make a set of tools that would apply in any telecollaboration system. One of them is repositionable captioning, so that you can take the captions and I can put them right up. So if someone's presenting, I can pull the captions up and put it next to the slides or wherever it is, so I can look back and forth and I'm not trying to do this kind of a thing. Caption identification. The captions are always behind, and if you have a rapidly moving conversation, I see the captions and I look up at and I can't tell who's saying it, so I look up and my telecollaboration system tells me who's speaking. And I go, oh, that's who said that, but that's not. That's who's speaking now. The captions were the last person who was speaking, but the captioner is about 3, 4, 5 seconds behind. And so you can't actually tell who's saying what, which can be really important in conversations and meetings. We have something called crowdsourced caption correction, and this one is really powerful. All of you have seen one where the captions, if you ever sat and watched the captions in a meeting and you looked at them and you went, oh my God, I pity whoever is going to be looking at these captions. I can't figure out what's being said and I'm listening, or this is not what that person said, or this is the opposite of what the person said. And then names and scientific terms, forget it. I was at one where it turned out it was the Urean wreath, and I couldn't figure out what the Urean wreath was, but it turned out it was the Mylean sheath. It just, the person didn't have good English language, and the caption was going along typing. With this, anybody who's watching it, first of all, can see the captions on their local device, so they can see them if they have low vision. But anybody in the room can just highlight the Urean wreath and type in Mylean sheath. And instantly, everybody in the entire world who's watching this telecollaboration sees the captions correct as they go on. So for the first time, a person who's deaf, and also people from other languages who depend on the captions are going to get accurate information. And this now can couple with speech recognition. I was going to do a demo, but we're too compressed here, to show you that everything I'm saying can be recognized with a very high degree of accuracy. The problem is it's all one big, long, huge sentence with no punctuation, and every now and then it makes a very silly error that makes it so you can't figure out what on earth I said. And again, with this crowdsourced caption, you just click at the beginning of each sentence, and it instantly will capitalize it, and you can change this, so that people who couldn't afford captioning could now afford it for the first time. Audio description on demand, the ability to be in a meeting and ask for somebody else to describe what's going on. Local slide synchronization. People who are blind often can use the slides if they get them locally, but then they have no idea what slide the presenter's on, so to synchronize them. Assistance on demand. You can sit in a meeting sometimes and you can lean over to the person next to you and ask what just happened, or what was just said, or something like this. Well, the ability for anybody to be able to do that without having to disturb the meeting, or even if they're in telecollaboration, they're by themselves. Now, we talked about before the fact that you get information on 2 channels, and so one thing could be the ability to be able to compare the 2 channels, to look at the one channel and then the other. So if I'm watching something and it's being captioned and I need to go back, the ability to kind of like TiVo your way back in the meeting. So you can back up, I can watch the presentation, I can back up, I can watch the captions, and then I hit play, but it plays a little faster than normal. So for most people, that means it would just talk a little bit faster like this, and you can still understand what I'm saying, but I'm going a little bit faster. And for some people who talk normally like this, it actually could speed them up to something that would be a rate you'd like until you catch up to the meeting. And then touch and read, the ability to have anything read to you. So if you have trouble reading and somebody puts up a caption or a slide and it's hard for you to read or keep up, you just highlight it and it reads it to you and you keep right on going. Or you could touch it and have it explained, like somebody talks about some term and you don't know what it is. You can pull it up. The ability to, in advance, see all of the words and language that are going to be used, compare them against what you know, and it'll say, here's a bunch of terms you're going to hear about, and you don't know what they mean, or at least you've never said you did, and you say, I know that one, I know that one. You figure out what the other ones mean, and then you store them off so that you actually aren't in a meeting trying to listen and still trying to translate what on earth they're saying or look things up. Expressive language repair. People who don't have good language skills often just never say anything because they're afraid of saying something that sounds not very articulate or intelligent, just because they don't have the language skill. So it lets them try out a language, it can correct it, and then when they're ready, they can just say it, but they're going to say it with proper language. Simplified interfaces and Braille support. So these are some of the things that we've looked at. And so we're working on something called an open tool tray system. It's modular, it's open source, and it just pops up a little tray at the bottom of any telecollaboration system and allows you then to use these tools with the system. And if the system is designed to work with the OTS, then it works even better, but it's meant to work with non-cooperating systems so that you're not out in the cold if the person who's doing this teleconference whips out a brand new system on you, or, as usually happens, every 2 months they update it and completely change it around so you can't figure it out and nothing works with it again. Let's also talk about accessible cloud-based collaboration and collaborative development tools. Now, there's nothing inaccessible about the cloud per se. Like electricity and the internet itself, it's pure technology and it doesn't have an interface. It doesn't have a human interface. So unless you actively filter or selectively impede content, there's not an accessibility problem there. However, all of the services and applications that come across the internet and what we think of as being the cloud that makes the internet the cloud have human interfaces, and it's those interfaces that are the problem that we need to really focus in on. Now, the best guidelines for these and for both these services and applications is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They are the guidelines for how you make applications and content on the web accessible. And this is, in fact, what both the Access Board now, 508 in the United States, and Europe is now taking and adopting as the standard, not only for web content, but for any documents and for other applications. They actually took a committee, got together, created a set of rules for both, and they looked at them and they said, gee, these are basically the same thing. And there's now a new document out from the W3C talking about how you apply web content guidelines to non-web documents and applications. One of the aspects of this is the fact that many of these talk about creating information which is programmatically determinable. And everybody says, oh, that's for blind people, so it can be read aloud. It also allows it to be simplified, it allows it to be translated, and as we get better and better tools, these are all really powerful for the cognitive area. The problem is, what these guidelines do is make it so that it's accessible to AT. Our problem is we don't have really good cognitive AT, as Bill was pointing out. So even if you expose the information, we need to have a much better set of tools to deal with cognitive disabilities. Now, you saw a few things in what I just talked about But as we create better and better AT, it'll automatically plug into some of this accessibility that's already being put in if you follow these kinds of guidelines. So strategies for meeting WCAG 2 in the cloud. First of all, there are techniques and standards for WCAG, and if you look at them, they are all designed for web apps and web content, and that's what the cloud is. So look at the techniques that are defined along with this. But go beyond that. You can provide extras for on your web pages and in your web content. You can put accessibility settings. You can allow it to be personalized, again, as Bill talked about. Instead of making somebody have to enlarge the fonts after the fact, and kind of sometimes your layout won't do that very well, if you make it so that it will naturally, you can allow the user from your page to change the font size, and you make sure that your page will make sense, or it'll break into 2 pages or something if it needs to. Higher contrast, simpler layouts. I go to my banking site, and there's always sort of 3 things, but they have so many options all over that thing that it takes me like 30 seconds after I get to the page just to find that thing that I used to use to transfer funds to my son, and I always select the wrong one because they always have 2 of them, and one of them is called transfer, and that's the wrong one. You don't use transfer to transfer money. You have to use quick something. I forgot what it is, but heaven help the other 98% of the population. But we can make it so when I came there, it was a simple screen with the basics, and then a button for more if I want to do more. Why does everything have to be designed as if only the designer of the page is the intended user of the page? We also can, and again, it was really fun to watch Bill's thing. If we provide an interface socket, we actually take all the functionality, instead of providing an interface, we make a socket, a machine socket. We can then have it so that you can have whatever page you want to have as your main page, but you have an interface socket, so there's an alternate way to get all the functionality, and you control the socket, by the way. You don't expose this to the outside world. A banking site is never going to provide an interface socket to an external machine. But we can drop in something we call an individual user interface generator, and we're working on these right now, so that you can come in and say, I can't see, and it'll generate an interface to that functionality and serve it back out. Now, the company still controls this UIIG, so it's not outside, but it provides for the first time the ability for having a variety of different kinds of interfaces provided to them. And this is one of the things that we're beginning to work on. The keys to success: we need to make things easier, faster, cheaper for mainstream developers. We can talk about all the things that mainstream developers ought to do, and they'll never happen because they're all scrambling to try to keep up and stay ahead in this dog-eat-dog internet speed world. So we need to make it so that there's less that the companies need to do. There are more tools to make it. We're going to make it doable without requiring designers to be accessibility experts. If we decide that the way to do this is to make every interface designer an accessibility expert, we're dead in the water. We can't even get them to be interface designers designing the interfaces. They usually hand them off to whoever's doing the code that week. We need to make it cost less all the way around, so that the business case is a lot easier to make within companies. Because they look at this, and it just costs a lot, and they smile, they tell you it's really important. They can even have children who have that same disability, and it still won't happen because they can't jeopardize their company for a personal interest. But if you show them how they can do it within the constraints of their company, our companies are full of people who have disabilities. They're full of people who don't have disabilities, who don't have kids, who would still like to do this, if we can try and put it within reach, and that's what we need to do. And another thing we do is once they get it in there, we've got to make sure that people know about it. The adoption rate, people call me on the phone and they have a problem, and it's right in their operating system already, and they don't know it's there, they don't know how to access it, or it's too complicated. So these are part of something that we've talked about as being the GPII, and I'm not going to talk much except that it has 3 goals: to make it easier for people to discover what works for them, to make it so that anything they walk up to, any place, it will just happen, And then thirdly, to make it faster, easier, and much less expensive to create the solutions. And number 3 is, mainstream and AT, but 1 and 2 are also important for driving the demand. And this is basically the major components. We have 2 large European projects. We have 1 U.S., and then the whole thing, by the way, grew out of a NITER program, so that what's not seen behind here is the NITER-funded RERC, which is where this whole concept came from, and it's now getting a worldwide adoption. And I'm going to end by just doing a quick demo here. I have a computer running Windows 7, and just to show you the sort of this instant accessibility. This one has an NFC reader on it, so I just have a little NFC tag, but I also have a ring that you could use. And this is for someone who needs a keyboard, and they just come up to the device and there's a keyboard on screen. And so when they walk away, the keyboard disappears. You could have someone who needs to have a screen reader, for example, although I think I've got this muted in deference to the previous speaker. There we go. So if somebody comes up to any computer anywhere, the ability to have it so that, okay? And yet, when they go away, it disappears. If you've ever had a computer where somebody left the screen reader on and we're not able to use it. But imagine a teacher who's got to keep setting up different computers, or in a shared workspace, different people walk up to the computer. But we can make things very different. So let's say we have somebody who can't deal with technology at all, and you want to have a very, very simple. We can actually have it so that the entire interface changes, and you can see there's nothing here. There's no scroll bars, there's no menu bars, there's no nothing. There's just a simple mailbox and a photo album and a contact registry. And each of these then also operates very simply. In this case, mail looks like mail, and things like this. So, but this is not a special program. This is a different interface. This is actually Gmail, Picasa, and Google. So this is the standard stuff that you use every day. It looks really complex, but we can make it look really, really simple. And then when she walks away, it just disappears. And when she goes to a new computer, it pops up exactly like it was on the old computer. And so we even have some of these things that we're doing for, this one is for farmers in Africa, where they can't can't read at all, and so an entire interface that will address their needs in this fashion. And then this is entirely cloud-based accessibility, so then we have the ability to log into cloud systems and be able to now access the computer using AT that's in the cloud. So these are the kinds of things that are coming, and these are the things that are possible with cloud computing. But we need to figure out how to make it, as I said, so that it's ubiquitous and it costs a lot less for people to integrate. But there's a great potential here in cloud computing, and it can seriously reduce the cost for accessibility and increase accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. We'll take questions at the end of the presentation period. Our next speaker is Judith Trevanaris from the Ontario College of Art and Design. She'll be giving her presentation remotely.
Operator, please unmute Judith Trevanaris.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, can you speak up a little bit?
Okay, I'll get closer to the